6.1 Cells and the flow of energy. In order to maintain their organization and carry out metabolic activities, cells as well as organisms need a constant supply of energy. Energy, defined as the ability to do work or bring about a change, allows living things to carry on processes of life, including growth, development, metabolism, and reproduction. Organic nutrients produced by photosynthesizers, algae plants, and some bacteria directly provide organisms with energy. But consider that photosynthesizers use solar energy to produce organic nutrients. Therefore, life on Earth is ultimately dependent on solar energy. Forms of energy. Energy occurs in two forms, kinetic and potential energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. And when a ball rolls down a hill or a moose walks through grass, potential energy is stored energy. Its capacity to accomplish work is not being used at the moment. The food we eat has potential energy because it can be converted into various types of kinetic energy. Food is specifically called chemical energy because it is composed of organic molecules such as carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. When a moose walks, it has converted chemical energy into a type of kinetic energy called mechanical energy. As seen in this diagram, solar energy is provided to the leaves of this plant, where the moose eats the leaves and converts it into chemical energy from the food into mechanical energy, and in this process, heat is lost during that process. The two laws of thermodynamics. Figure 6.1 illustrates the flow of energy in a terrestrial ecosystem. Plants capture only a small portion of solar energy, and much of it dissipates as heat. When plants photosynthesize and then make use of the food they produce, more heat results. Still, there is enough remaining to sustain a moose and the other organisms in an ecosystem. As they metabolize nutrient molecules, all the captured solar energy eventually dissipates as heat. Therefore, energy flows and does not cycle. Two laws of thermodynamics explain why energy flows through the ecosystems and through cells. These laws were formulated by early researchers who studied energy relationships and exchanges. The first law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of energy, states energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be changed from one form to another. When leaf cells photosynthesize, they use solar energy to form carbohydrate molecules from carbon dioxide and water. Carbohydrates are rich energy molecules, while carbon dioxide and water are energy poor molecules. Not all of the captured solar energy becomes carbohydrates because some becomes heat. So as seen here, the sun provides the solar energy to turn CO2 and H2O into a carbohydrate or glucose in plant cells in their chloroplasts. Figure 6.1 shows the flow of energy. The plant converts solar energy from the chemical energy of nutrient molecules. The moose converts a portion of this chemical energy to mechanical energy of motion. Eventually, all the solar energy absorbed by the plant dissipates as heat. Obviously, plant cells do not create the energy they use to produce carbohydrate molecules. That energy comes from the sun. Is any energy destroyed? No, because the heat they give off is also a form of energy. Similarly, a moose uses the energy derived from the carbohydrates to power its muscles. And its cells use the energy. None is destroyed, but some becomes heat, which dissipates into the environment. Carbohydrates fuel the muscle contraction, and this creates heat. The second law of thermodynamics therefore applies to living systems. The second law of thermodynamics states energy can not be changed from one form to another without the loss of usable energy. In our example, this law is upheld because some of the solar energy taken in by the plant and some of the chemical energy within the nutrient molecules taken in by the moose becomes heat. When heat dissipates into the environment, it is no longer usable. That is, it is not available to do work. With transformation upon transformation, eventually all usable forms of energy become heat that is lost to the environment. Heat that dissipates into the environment cannot be captured and converted to one of the other forms of energy. As a result of the second law of thermodynamics, no process requiring conversion of energy is ever 100% efficient. Much of the energy is lost in the form of heat. In automobiles, the gasoline engine is between 20% and 30% efficient in converting chemical energy into mechanical energy. The majority of the energy is obviously lost as heat. Cells are capable of about 40% efficiency, with the remaining energy being given off to the surroundings as heat. Cells and entropy. The second law of thermodynamics can be stated another way. Every energy transformation makes the universe less organized and more disordered. The term entropy, entrope, a turning inward, is used to indicate the relative amount of disorganization. Since the processes that occur in cells and energy transformations, the second law means that every process that occurs in cells always does so in a way that increases the total entropy or disorder of the universe. Then, too, any one of these processes makes less energy available to do useful work in the future. Figure 6.2 shows two processes that occur in cells. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that glucose tends to break apart into carbon dioxide and water. Why? Because glucose is more organized and therefore less stable than its breakdown products. Also, hydrogen ions on one side of a membrane tend to move to the other side unless they are prevented from doing so. Why? Because when they are distributed randomly, entropy has increased. As an analogy, you know from experience that a neat room is more organized but less stable than a messy room, which is disorganized but more stable. How do you know a neat room is less stable than a messy room? Consider that a neat room always tends to become more messy. On the other hand, you know that some cells can make glucose out of carbon dioxide and water, and all cells can actively move ions to one side of the membrane. How do they do it? These cellular processes obviously require an input of energy from an outside source. This energy ultimately comes from the sun. Living things depend on a constant supply of energy from the sun because the ultimate fate of the solar energy in the biosphere is to become randomized in the universe as heat. A living cell is a temporary repository of order purchased at the cost of a constant flow of energy. Contrast potential energy with kinetic energy and explain how the second energy law is related to entropy. Also, looking at the figures, we see glucose is way more organized than carbon dioxide, which is less organized. And the channel proteins in the cell membrane, they show an unequal distribution of hydrogen ions. So an equal distribution leads to more entropy, more stable entropy in the cell.